So we're going to pivot to something we're going to spend less time on because it's not worth spending the same amount of time on,
Yeah.
which is the Lament for Gandalf. Now, the movies don't have this, for those of you that just watch the movies. The movies have a lament for Gandalf, which is going on in the background as they're all chilling on Lothlorien, and Legolas is walking around and he's absorbing it, and the members of the Fellowship, some of them, I forget which,
It's the
ask him
hobbits,
basically,
I think.
what are they singing? And he's like, I don't have the heart to tell you. The grief for me is still too real.
So what they are singing at that point is actually what Faramir says in Lament for Boromir.
No,
If I
it's a
remember
lament
correct.
it's a lament for Gandalf.
Is it? Because I thought
It
the
is a-
translation for that was that I value not the arrow for its swiftness, nor the blade for its sharpness. I honor the warrior for his courage, or something along those lines, which I thought was something that Faramir said about Boromir upon finding
might
his
be
horn.
That might be something you said about Boromir, but that's not what their elves are singing about Gandalf.
Okay.
All that they know is that nearby elvish voices are singing, and there are many sweet and sad words, and in the midst of it they'll hear Mithrandir, Mithrandir, or O Pilgrim Grey. So they know it's about Gandalf, but they don't know what is being sung. And they're all sorrowing for him, right? And sorrow is proper to put into words. So as Tolkien says, it was Frodo who first put something of his sorrow into halting words. He was seldom moved to make song or rhyme. Even in Rivendell he had listened and not sung himself, but etc. This just comes. Now he sings. When evening in the Shire was grey, his footsteps on the hill were heard. Before the dawn he went away, on journey long without a word. From Wilderland to western shore, from northern waste to southern hill, through dragon lair and hidden door, and darkling woods he walked at will. With dwarf and hobbit, elves and men, with mortal and immortal folk, with bird on bow and beast in den, in their own secret tongues he spoke. A deadly sword, a healing hand, a back that bent beneath its load, a trumpet voice, a burning brand, a weary pilgrim on the road. A lord of wisdom throned he sat, swift in anger, quick to laugh. An old man in a battered hat, who leaned upon a thorny staff. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken upon the stone. In Khazad-dûm his wisdom died. So this is told from the perspective of a hobbit.
And how the
It's
Hobbit
told-
remembers Gandalf.
How the hobbit remembers Gandalf. Because the initial scope of how they describe Gandalf is how any hobbit would have. He showed up in the evening. He was quiet. And he left before the dawn, without a word. He was humble. And even their scope of his wanderings, like they know that he dealt with Dragon Lair and Hidden Door. They know that he dealt with Darkling Wood and passed them through. But their scope is that he moved from Wilderland, which is effectively like Bree, to Western Shore. You know? And there's a purpose behind that, I think. Or at least there's something to be learned from it. Like, oh, he went all over the world. He went over our world. Beyond that, too. We know that. But he was one of us. He was not long among us. And yet we respected him. And yet we loved him. He was silent, but he was wise. He had charisma. He had courage. He clearly had power within him. And we didn't necessarily process that. He was the guy that showed up and did fireworks, but like he had power within him. Some part of us might recognize that. And yet he had hands of healing. But did that make him some great king to us? No, his back bent beneath his load. You know, that stanza. A trumpet voice, power. A burning brand, power and courage. A weary pilgrim on the road. One of us. Gandalf is being described as the epitome of the extraordinary within the ordinary. And not because He's this fake character that Tolkien invented to represent that. Simply because that's who he was. Because there was a sense of the ordinary about him, even if he is a Maiar. And there is a sense in which we can all be that too, right? Like what is ultimately being presented is something that's accessible. It's something that we all kind of feel within all of us, that we might all aspire to be. A trumpet voice, a burning brand. How many of us would cry out against injustice and such? But under what form? As what type of person? A weary pilgrim on the road. How many of us would like the courage to have a deadly sword when self-defense calls for it, when the defense of our family calls for it, and yet have healing hand for all that need it, friend or foe? But that's described afterwards as just a back that bent beneath its load.
You want to know why your grandpa's hunched over? It's because he carried your family for his entire life.
The nobility of that, though. You know? The beauty of that.
Now, what Frodo has described, what Frodo sings, while it is the perspective of a hobbit, it is of a hobbit who knows him particularly well, and of a hobbit who is particularly close to him, especially along the journey that they've just taken, that led to Moria.
Even then, though, only so well.
So, I would like to read the verse that Sam added.
Yes, that's fair. Go for it.
Because Sam it really is the epitome of the ordinary man. And what Sam is bringing is the overall remembrance of the Shire. Because if you recall, you know this even in the films, Gandalf was the old man who brought fireworks.
Mm-hmm. On the Hobbit soon.
The finest rockets ever seen. They burst in stars of blue and green. Or after thunder, golden showers came falling like a rain of flowers. So if a hobbit remembers nothing else of Gandalf, he remembers the most beautiful fireworks display in the world, which unbeknownst to him was powered by wizard magic. How many people in the Shire actually knew of Gandalf as the wizard?
Well, I think they did, but they had no idea what a wizard really was.
And how many of them just thought of Gandalf the Grey and his fantastic show of fireworks? Who other than Bilbo really knew what Gandalf could do?
Yeah.
But Gandalf came to see his very good friend, possibly his best friend, I would say, Gandalf and Bilbo, because he doesn't exhibit a closeness or a fellowship with anybody in the Lord of the Rings trilogy like he does with Bilbo. Like with Frodo, it's sort of an uncle-like protectiveness and a wisdom of a teacher. That's not something that he shares with Bilbo. As with Bilbo in The Hobbit, they were side by side. And yes, while Gandalf is a Maya, obviously they are leagues apart as far as their station in the universe. Gandalf is a literal angel.
Mm-hmm.
And Bilbo is the smallest of creatures. The way that Bilbo and Gandalf interact is as old friends do. Whereas with Frodo and the other hobbits is as somebody that they look up to. Gandalf and Bilbo almost interact as though they're equals. Almost as though they're brothers.
That's a fair point.
Mostly because, that might be because my argument is that Bilbo Baggins is Tolkien's self-insert.
Could be.
He enjoys a good pipe and he writes a good book. The argument was made that that was Tom Bombadil, but I think it's probably both. It's Tom Bombadil and Bilbo Baggins.
But to return to this as
the rest,
I'll let you finish.
Yeah, I meant to bring that back around. The rest of the hobbits, probably, if they remember nothing else, they remember the fireworks. Even if they don't remember the old gray man's name, they still remember the fireworks. So they still remember what he did for them.
And there was some...
Like you said, that's like the pinnacle of ordinariness.
Yeah. Yeah, ordinariness, simplicity, and that is just, that's so present in the song, as I've already said. And then to close, similar to the Song of Beren and Luthien, everything else is kind of summed up in the end. Well, in this case, it's not quite like the end of the story is summed up, although it is. But in this case, it's a grief that they're still processing. He was he was this guy. He was the deadly sword, the healing hand, the back that bent beneath its load. A lord of wisdom throned he sat, and he was like this, and he was an old man, and leaned upon his thorn staff. He stood upon the bridge alone, and fire and shadow both defied. His staff was broken on the stone. In Khazad-dûm his wisdom died. And they continue to mourn, as you would. That's how you put your mourning into words. That is how you properly lament for someone. All of this, you remember who they were. You remember all the good times together.
Yeah.
And probably for your sake, you spend more time on the good times than the bad times, right?
Yeah, we've got
This
five.
is who he was. He was amazing.
5 stanzas of happy,
Yeah.
and then one of sad.
And one at the end. And now we're going to figure out how to process that end. And yes, I just put on my acting chops, but it's worth it.
If you remember, like it's like this. My grandfather passed away last year. It's like this when I remember him. Yeah, it may not be anything so eloquent as this, because my grandfather's presence I remember being a constant and calm and peaceful and at ease, making me feel at ease. And hearing him tell stories about the old days. Everybody's grandpa tells stories about the old days. And then just like that, he was gone. If you're having a hard time figuring out what the word bittersweet means, that's it. Because I can very vividly see in my mind the image of my grandfather telling a story, laughing, smiling. And then I also remember getting the phone call that said he was gone. And then remembering that his last words were, "I'm done," after receiving the sacraments. What a hell of a way to go.
Exactly.
That's what Frodo is singing about Gandalf. If I was to sit down and write a poem about my grandfather, that's what it would be. Talk about his growing up on a farm, learning the value of work, raising his children the best way he knew how, and smiling through a bushy mustache with a twinkle in his eye at his grandson. Telling me stories and telling everybody stories of what the old days were like for him. And then that very last verse of the song would be the day I got the phone call. Because that's how, as you said, that's how you are to mourn. 90% happy, 10% sad.